everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. I hope everyone had a wonderful Pesach. We are now in Sfirat HaOmer, and if you think nothing is happening, things are absolutely happening. So let's get into it. We continue with the subject of the book of Esther. This is chapter 50F, and this one is called Godsmack. Hallelujah Adonai kol goyim, shabechu kol haumim ki gavar alenu chasdo ve'emet Adonai le'olam, hallelujah. And Haman entered before the king. That's where we left off last time. The king said to him, I wish to make great and elevate one man. The way he said it was actually to elevate and make great even more regarding one man who was already great and elevated. That's how the Hebrew kind of writes it, but there's no way to perfectly translate that. Specifically, so that Haman should believe the king is speaking of him, since he was the only man who the king elevated to such a status to begin with. Now remember, the king had a dream. Haman was there. He's like, oh, he gets it now. Like everything, the penny dropped. So the question that our commentator Velod Ella is asking is that how much more can one who is already literally second to the king be elevated other than practically giving him his crown and the throne? It's a legitimate question. The next step up for Haman was to be king. This is what the king was getting at. Since there is no one higher and more esteemed in my kingdom than you, Haman, we have to think about how exactly to elevate you even more. And so it is only reasonable that you be the one to tell me just how we can do that. See what he did? Okay. He set up a nice trap for him because we know already that based on Haman's answer, the one that he gave, the one that we all read from the Megillah, he gave away his true desire, confirming the king's suspicions and his dream. The king said to him, I wish to make great and elevate one man. What should I do? Haman said in his heart, who could the king possibly desire to elevate more so than me, as said in Esther 6:6. And Haman entered, and the king said to him, what should be done to a man whom the king wishes to honor? And Haman said to himself, whom would the king wish to honor more than me? Now, we know that Haman was not stupid. Being very well versed and cultured with the ways of the world, he was a minister, he was an advisor, he was a conqueror, he was a strategist, he was a statesman, he was a showman. He was a very wealthy and very connected, influential individual, a charismatic speaker. He was evil, a lying, cunning, diabolical, self-serving, power-hungry, narcissistic sociopath. So he was a politician, basically. And every politician knows you never reveal what you want, only what you need to say in order to get you where you want to go. I mean, since when do politicians do what they say or say what they actually do? Look at the people in power. Anybody that does exactly what they say, they're not a politician. Clearly, right? That's why our text then says the following. All the seed of Amalek say things in their hearts, but do not reveal the secret out loud. In other words, everybody's got a secret agenda. This is how Amalek works. It's very simple. Duplicitousness, if you will. Which is why when Haman revealed what he really wanted to Achashverosh, it was very much out of character for the root of who this person was. In fact, it went against the very grain of his existence. So how did this happen? The same way that all these tiny little convenient coincidences throughout Megillat Esther came to be. And this is how we see God through everything, right? So this was by God, it says, as said in Ecclesiastes 12:14. For every deed God will bring to judgment for every hidden thing, whether good or bad. Whether you say it, whether you think it. It doesn't do it hiddenly. Come on. Everything is going to be exposed. Everything is going to be revealed no matter what. What we do in private when we think no one is watching, or even like we said, even our thoughts, the only way to avoid this shame, when I say shame, this will be revealed before every created being in the universe from the beginning. Everything, everyone is going to know. The only way for this not to be revealed is to do full tshuva. Then God wipes it clean, as said in Isaiah 43:15, I am the Lord, your Holy One, the Creator of Israel, your King. God created us, and He knows that we will sin. Absolutely. These were the conditions of creation, be it by accident or on purpose. It's in the text. But if we do tshuva before the end, meaning before we die, before the day of judgment, because in the end, when it is time for judgment, as it says 10 verses later in Isaiah 43:25, I erase your transgressions for my sake, and your sins I will not remember. In other words, you will have transgressions, and you will have sins, but I will take them away. How? By doing tshuva. But if not, it's going to blurt out of you. It's going to be revealed, whether by someone else or by you, you will betray yourself, even against your own will, because the time for tshuva is up. And for Haman, that was the time. That's why everything happened at that point. He couldn't wait until the morning to come and ask the king to kill Mordechai. That's when God was like, okay, you're done. Ding, time's up. And so was the story with Haman. God waited and waited and waited until the very last minute, giving everyone the opportunity to do tshuva. That's what God does. That's why it's called erech hapayim, long suffering. So all the terrible things that Haman was doing and creating along the way, God was sustaining this evil person's life just for the sake, for the opportunity. Maybe he'll do tshuva because he's fair to everybody. Didn't do tshuva? Ad kan. Until Haman was going to make sure Mordechai was killed. But patience is a virtue, and God is not called long-suffering for nothing. Despite the plans of Haman to utterly destroy, kill, and annihilate God's people, he still sustained the life of Haman because that is what he chose to do. Just like Pharaoh, because that is what he chose. Until the point came where their time was up, and now they no longer had a choice. And so Haman told King Achashverosh, my Lord King, if you wish to honor the man whom you wish to honor, he should be given the garments which he himself, meaning which the king himself wore on the day of his coronation. That's like the biggest, puffiest thing. You saw Charles, right? When he was crowned king. So all of a sudden he had the big fluffy crown with the purple robe and all those, the little pumpernickel things on it. Those are like the most glorious in-your-face garments. He should be given the garments which he himself wore on the day of his coronation, and the horse which the king rode upon on that day, and the crown thereof. He wanted everything. What did he just say? He wants to be coronated king. You see, the Megillah gives us just the bottom line, and we're going to get to that. But through the Midrash, we understand what actually really went down over there. So Haman basically says, give me your horse, give me your garments, give me your crown, parade me through the streets. There we go. I'm the king now, right? Look at me, right? Okay, so I am sure that everyone who heard this, their eyes would widen, their jaw would drop to the floor, as all eyes would be on the king's response to that ridiculous request, which no one doubted he was speaking of himself, right? It's like, yeah, that's what you should do to the person you wish to elevate the most. You understand? Okay, so kind of how Jews look at knockoff religions when they claim the same exact thing. Sitting on the throne of God, with God, for goodness sakes. It's like they tossed out everything that came before them, They did, right? So in Deuteronomy 32:39, it says, see now that it is I am the one, and there is no God with me. Imadi, not beside, with me. Done, that's it. I cause death and grant life. Nobody else. I strike, but I heal, and no one can rescue from my hand. Amen. And yes, the king will handle this as well. So Haman asked for the crown as we can see in Esther 6:8. Let them bring the royal raiment of the king that the king wore, and that the horse that the king rode upon, specifically in the coronation, right? And the royal crown should be placed on his head. The king, Ahasuerus, said to him, Wicked one, is it not enough for you to desire my crown? And what honor have you left for me? In other words, so where do I fit in all of this? Should I go retire on a beachfront property somewhere? Watch as they're faced with hard questions all of a sudden. In other words, you put that in their face. Oh, no, he's not God. He's just the son of God, but equal to... You see, it's crazy. Now what? So you want to be me? Is that what the king is asking Haman over here? And since Haman saw that the king was angry at the claim of the crown, he retracted his statement regarding it. And this is what Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says. So, which is what we can read in the next verse, that Haman leaves out the crown but keeps everything else. So, verse 9, and let the raiment and the horse be delivered into the hand of the one of the king's most noble princes. And let them, meaning the most noble prince, and let that noble prince dress the man whom the king wishes to honor, and let him parade him on the horse in the city square, and announce before him, so shall be done to the man whom the king wishes to honor. So in other words, you take, says Haman to the king, you take your number one guy, your top guy, and you have him put the guy that you want to honor and to parade him through the streets. Haman is the one who said that this man is to be led and be given honor of the king's most noble princes, right? And who was more honored or noble than Haman himself? Nobody. That was him. And this is where, boom, the bomb dropped. Verse 10, and the king said to Haman, hurry, take the raiment and the horse, as you had spoken, and do so to Mordechai the Jew, who sits in the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that you have spoken. Now the Radal says that the reason the text says hurry, why does it say hurry? Because Haman didn't want to go at first. There was an exchange, there was a back and forth. Ahasuerus is not a king who should be asking anything twice. In fact, he's not. Remember Vashti? That's what a no gets you. But here is Haman, who was on top of the world, who gave his honest and most genuine, unfiltered answer regarding his truest and deepest desire. God allowed that to happen. And the king said, give it to Mordechai. How much would you pay to have seen Haman's face at that moment? He knew exactly who he was talking about, but watch him play dumb. When Haman heard this, he was taken down and terrified. So that's the rough translation. Hebrew says the word they used in Hebrew is niv'at, as in translated to taken down. But niv'at comes from liv'ot, to kick. Liv'ot bakadur, to kick the ball. So he was kind of kicked down the ladder. The literal translation would be that Haman got kicked, but that would lose its meaning. The meaning is that at that moment, his status had been lowered by the king in his court, because he and all those around him realized that he is not the one who the king desires to honor, like he thought. Who could the king possibly want to honor more than me? Mordechai. Great question, Haman. Mordechai. You can only have one number one, and Haman was no longer that one. And that is what bothered him more than anything else. That is what terrified him. Remember, all his wealth and all his influence, everything he had, he was arguably wealthier even than the king, more influential than the king. All his wealth, all his influence, everything that he had, it was worthless to him because this one single Jew refused to bend the knee. He said so himself, Esther chapter 5. And Haman went out on that day, happy and with a cheerful heart. But when Haman saw Mordechai in the king's gate, And this is chapter 5, right? In the king's gate. And he neither rose nor stirred because of him. Haman was filled with wrath against Mordecai. But Haman restrained himself, and he came home, and he sent and brought his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches and the multitude of his sons and all the ways that the king had promoted him, and that he had exalted him over the princes and the king's servants. And Haman said, Esther did not even bring anyone to the party that she made except me, and tomorrow too I am invited to her with the king as an after party. But all this is worth nothing to me. Look at this maniac. Understand, there are people like this in this world today. Doesn't matter what they have. But all this is worth nothing to me. Every time I see Mordecai the Jew sitting in the king's gate. The bane of his existence, right? Everything is on purpose. He could have lived a long and happy and prosperous life. Who knows, if he maybe had a little bit more patience, he could have usurped the throne. Who knows? But the point is, this is what he did for himself. But his true essence was inflamed, thanks to a Jew. Thank God, thanks to a Jew. Amalek will never be satisfied until every last Jew is dead, no matter how high their status or how long and downtrodden the Jews' status is. It doesn't matter. They cannot even help themselves. It's who they are. Now, here's another crazy example of Amalek living among us as Jews. Right before Pesach, I started this like before Pesach, but again, you're only getting it right now. I needed the break. So right before Pesach, and I thought about this long and hard, but this is what I'm doing. Right before Pesach, a senior anesthesiologist from Rambam Hospital in Haifa, here in Israel, his name is Erez Dvir. The reason I'm saying this is because I saw this on TV, news article, and I saw more. Who is a Jew, senior anesthesiologist at Rambam Hospital in Haifa. His name is Erez Dvir. Remember that. He is a Jew. Not by choosing, of course, but Amalek beyond a shadow of a doubt. How do we know? He was driving his car by a high school when he suddenly pulled over and got out violently. Why? Because he saw a religious kid, like one of the Chabad guys over there with the tefillin stands, putting on tefillin for one of the secular kids outside the school, on the street. From this point, everything was caught on camera by the students. You could see the videos, everybody's got cell phones. They recorded the whole thing. From the moment he got out of his car, and then he started pushing and shoving and all these things, and then what happened next? He was screaming and saying that it was illegal what they were doing, and began to shove the high school student, a minor, right, who defended the guy who gave him the tefillin. The teenager stood his ground and pushed him back, to when this human filth, yes, human filth, went back to his car, got a knife, and began to chase the student, not the religious student, the secular student who put on tefillin, and tried to stab him. The student ran right into the school as senior anesthesiologist from Rambam Hospital in Haifa, Erez Dvir, chased him into the school, inciting violence against minors, public disturbance, attempted murder. Who knows? But the guy was under house arrest despite the whole thing being caught on camera with literally dozens of witnesses. You have the witnesses even on camera over there. No one heard from this story again. No one knows what happened, but this happened. Amalek, disguised as a Jew, tried to kill a Jew, is being protected by other Amalekites disguised as Jews within the joke of the justice system and the news media who are not reporting it. You cannot make this stuff up. This is happening in Israel today. This is that seething hatred that cannot be hidden. Of course, this guy could throw away his entire reputation and senior anesthesiologist at Rambam Hospital in Haifa, Erez Dvir, with all his incredible reputation. I don't know, let's say he does. On camera, you're trying to stab a child? Really? He's probably working. Rambam Hospital put out a statement. They said, hey, We don't know this man. I mean, we do, but it happened off the hospital grounds. It happened when he wasn't working, so we're not connected to this. Not like, yo, this dude is never working here again. None of these things, right? How do other Jews, Orthodox Jews, know that if they have any kind of surgery and they need an anesthesiologist, that this man isn't gonna just maybe up the dose just a little bit? We don't know. I'm not saying anything new. All right, this is all out there. So this is what we are facing today in Israel, which is a lot worse from anti-Semitism from the nations. Because, like, yes, you are very clearly who you are, but here among us, they are many. So. But they can't hide. When he saw the tefillin, that was it for him. They will throw their entire lives away just for the sake of harming a Jew. That's what Amalek is, and that's what he did over there. Not to mention Haman, but this dude here in Israel today. Or keeping them from connecting with God because they themselves cannot connect with God as they rejected God and they know it in their dirty souls. And so too Haman, he could not help himself and was taken down by his own doing. And remember, Esther didn't even have the conversation yet with Achashverosh regarding her lineage and how Haman tried to kill us. This was all Haman's doing. He did this to himself. That was just the sugar on top. Once Haman heard the news regarding Mordechai, he said, "My Lord King, there are many Mordechais," because Mordechai was a common name. The king told him, "The Jew." To which Haman replied, saying, "There are many Jews named Mordechai." And the king said, "The Jew who sits at the gates of the king. Shut your mouth. Do what I tell you. Stop messing around." Now, this is one of those situations where the person hearing the command, given its gravity, had to make absolutely sure that the person in question was being discussed. Haman knew exactly who it was, but he did not want to do it. Lehavdil, we got Abraham in Genesis 22:2. And he said, "Please take your son, your only one, whom you love, yea, Isaac," right? "And go away to the land of Moriah and bring him up there for the burnt offering in one of the mountains, which I will tell you. Please take your son." I have two sons. I have Ishmael, and then I have Isaac, your only one. They are their only son to their mother, right? Hagar and Sarah. "Whom you love." I love them both. "Isaac." "Yes, Lord." "And now what would you like me to do?" "Take him over there." Okay. In other words, it wasn't like, "Oh, who are you referring to?" Whatever God said, Abraham had to clarify just to make sure he's doing it correctly. Abraham was not trying to get out of this, and this back and forth went on even before the command was given. Abraham is a man who lived solely for God's namesake in the world, so there's no question. Unlike Haman, who knew very well exactly which Jew the king was referring to, doing everything he could do to deter the king from making him exact this command, the one that he himself gave. Haman then said to the king, "My lord king, I would think that maybe you can give him even greater honor by bestowing him with fields and vineyards. Surely they would suffice. But these," meaning adorning him with the king's coronation garments and parading him around the streets on the king's own coronation horse, declaring, "Thus shall be done to the man whom the king loves to honor, how will they benefit him?" said Haman to Achashverosh. A valid question by a wise and wicked man. But finally, thanks to God's help, King Achashverosh began to see things a bit clearer as to who should be considered friend and who should be considered foe. Though Haman was right, as the king's honor would be wasted on a man like Mordechai, who couldn't care less about honor or glory or riches and the like, right? He was the head of the Sanhedrin. Who do we say the head of all the Sanhedrin were? The Sanhedrin were the Mechokekim. They were the lawmakers of Israel. Even if Israel are outside the land of Israel, there was a Sanhedrin also over there in Shushan. Who are these guys? These are not guys that run for office like politicians. They are quite literally the opposite of politicians. These are the ones that despise money and despise power. And the people said, "You, do this." Fine. Because God says so and the Torah says, I'm going to do it. That they don't seek power, unlike those that are in power today. Everyone in power today has sought power and seeks to keep it and to gain more. And still, we give them, we know, our vote, our voice. Don't be foolish. This time is done. Anyway, So you understand, not relevant to Mordechai. But that's how he presented it, you see? That's how Haman wisely present. It wouldn't benefit him to do all these things for him. It would not properly honor him, my Lord King. That is how he very wisely and cunningly presented it. What Achashverosh finally understood him saying between the lines is, Mordechai is not worthy of such an honor and glory from the king. This is Amalek. What they say is never what they mean. It is all self-serving and comes down to one thing: stepping on Israel to the point of complete destruction. You see, the king's decree had nothing to do with Mordechai and everything to do with Haman, Amalek, exposing his true face and his intentions. To which the king replied, saying, "Go and do everything that you said. And furthermore, I can also give him all the fields and vineyards, just as you mentioned as well." That is a great suggestion, Haman. I'm going to do that too. At this point, Haman realized that anything he said would be used against him, so he refrained from any further suggestions. And so, in his last-ditch effort before completely trying the king's patience, he said the following: "My lord king, I will give you one of my sons, my eldest son, to go and give this honor to Mordechai the Jew." To which the king replied, "No. By my kingdom and crown, it is most fitting for you to do this. You are my number one guy." You know that's from, right? Batman. Okay. As Haman did stipulate that this should be done by the king's most esteemed advisor. And as Haman thought to himself, who is more esteemed than I? Nobody did this. This is all him. Right then, Haman took the garments and the horse and went to Mordechai, and he said to Mordechai, "Shalom." Shalom means so much more than in Hebrew than hello, goodbye, or peace. When one asks shalom from his fellow, they inquire about their complete and whole well-being. Seriously, it's not just like, "Hey, what's up? How you doing?" You know, no one wants to say, "Oh, I got problems." I don't want to hear your problems. It's, "Hey, what's up?" It's kind of like a thing. But when you say shalom, it's like, "Tell me." So when Haman said this to Mordechai, he did not mean it, obviously, in depth. He's just like, yeah, so this has to happen now. To which Mordechai replied with a quote from Isaiah 48:22. "Ein shalom amar Adonai l'rashaim." There is no shalom, peace, said the Lord, for the wicked. Haman then said to Mordechai, "Rise and adorn the king's coronation garments." Like we said, these were not only the king's garments, but they were the best of all his best, most royal and robust over-the-top kingly garments. To which Mordechai replied and said, "You world-class fool, shoteh ba'olam." Shoteh is a fool. Don't you already know that for these last 3 days, I'm wearing sackcloth and ashes and sit in sackcloth and ashes because of what you have done to me? Now take me to the bathhouse immediately, said Mordechai to Haman. So who is this guy and what did he do with Mordechai? Who is speaking right now? Remember, we dedicated an entire class to the wisdom of Mordechai and the fact that he had Ruach HaKodesh and he was a prophet. So he knew already what was what. And even if he didn't have Ruach HaKodesh or prophecy, if he had nothing, and he knew that every last man, woman, and child in Israel were fasting for the success of Esther, when that happens, success is guaranteed. It is guaranteed 100% of the time, all the time. When all of Israel will do this, that's it. You can put your money on that. There is no question that Esther would succeed in her venture to save the people because the people became one. If there was even one Jew who would not have fasted, prayed, and done tshuva, there would be no more Jews. So the fact that Mordechai was standing over there right now and Haman was coming to him and telling him all these things, at that moment, boom, there it is. Yeah, this is why Masechet Sanhedrin brings us the condition upon Israel's final redemption and the single catalyst for said condition, which is unconditional tshuva. And this is presented with a ruler whose decrees will be as harsh as those of as Haman's, to annihilate, to kill, and to destroy every last Jew. In other words, if you don't do tshuva, you are getting a Haman type of person, right? And then as a result of Israel facing certain death, every last man, woman, and child will do complete and full tshuva. And then, nig'alim, redemption, we will be saved. That's it. So Mordechai knew that this would work because it always has and it always will. Why is not everybody doing it? Because not everybody believes it. That's the problem. And so those that do not will be removed, and those that remain, that's it. So Mordechai knew that this would work. Like we said, it always has and it always will. The only problem is that the last time that this happened was during the time of the book of Esther, which was almost 2,700 years ago. It's been a problem. Since the destruction of the Second Temple, the moment all of Israel do tshuva, we get redeemed immediately, which again coincides with our Calling All Jews series. Please watch that. An existential crisis, a real one, will bring everyone to their knees, and we will see what comes out. And whatever comes out, that is the truth, right? In fact, I am confident that Mordechai saw this as a wonderful opportunity that God had orchestrated for the sake of tshuva and unity. And he was right, so it was. I'm assuming that he knew this, but there's no reason why he wouldn't clearly see this. To which he answered Haman, "Now take me to the bathhouse immediately." When Esther heard of this, she, as queen of the kingdom, passed a decree that no bathhouse should be functioning at that time. How does a bathhouse function? The water must be warmed up by kindling a fire. In other words, otherwise it's just, kind of sitting water over there. She further said that should any man order any of the caretakers of these bathhouses to light a fire and warm the water, the answer should be an emphatic no, under the penalty of death. Thus saith the queen. So, what did Haman do? What does a narcissistic sociopath do if they need to get something done, but the only way to do it is to put the doer, he who does it, in harm's way? Get someone else to do it. Duh. So, in this case, he sent his eldest son to go start the fire under penalty of death, prepare the bath, and bring Mordechai to the bathhouse. When they arrived at the bathhouse, Haman was nowhere to be found. So Mordechai picked up a stick or switch, depending on which culture you come from, and began to beat Haman's son's legs and his feet, saying, "Why didn't your daddy come here? Why did he send you to do his work? Your daddy is my slave." That is what he told him. If you have a hard time believing that, here's the Hebrew. Lama lo ba avicha be'atzmo, vehalo hu eved sheli. He is my slave. At that moment when Haman came to Mordechai, Mordechai knew v'nahafochu. Everything had just turned on his head. Haman's sons went to his father and told him everything that had happened. So then Haman himself came to Mordechai against his will into the bathhouse. He shaved his head, cleaned him up, dressed him to the nines. Haman then said to Mordechai, "Go on now, get up on that horse." To which Mordechai replied, "Oh, I would, but from the fast, which I was doing because of your decree to completely annihilate myself and my people, I am unfortunately too weak to embark this mighty steed on my own." What did Haman do? He lowered his entire body and his head, exposing his neck for Mordechai to step on. Oh yeah. Which he did, and then mounted and sat upon the king's horse. And as he mounted the horse with one foot, he kicked Haman with the other. To which Haman, the chutzpan, then quoted our Torah to Mordechai from Proverbs. Like they love to don't start with that. From Proverbs 24:17, saying, "Does it not say, Mordechai the Jew, when your enemy falls, do not rejoice, and when he stumbles, let your heart not exult," right? Binefol oivecha al tismach, ubekashlo al yagel libecha. Don't you just love it when Gentiles quote our Torah to us, thinking they got like a gotcha moment over there? And to those I say the same thing that Mordechai answered Haman, as he said, this is only relevant for Israel, dude. But regarding the nations, what does it say? But you will tread upon their high places. This is from Deuteronomy. Fortunate are you, O Israel, who is like you, O people, whose salvation is through the Lord, the shield who helps you, your majestic sword. Your enemies will lie to you, but you will tread upon their high places. What does this mean? That when Mashiach comes, what? We're going to live side by side with idolaters? They're going to be Christians here and churches and everything? We are commanded to destroy their high places. That means every church is going to be reduced to rubble, and every Christian will be vomited out of the land of Israel. Again, if you still hold on to the idolatrous religion. And when this happens, when our enemies, Ishmael and Edom, fall, by the way, ding dong, Pope's dead, we rejoiced. In fact, we rejoice here in Israel when Nasrallah was killed, when Sinwar was killed, when those who vex Israel are no longer. In fact, what did we just do? Is this harsh for you? What did we just do this last weekend, this last Shabbat, on the 7th day of Passover? What did we celebrate? We did as our ancestors did. On the beach of Yam Suf, Exodus 14 and 15, on that day, the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw Egypt dying on the seashore, dead. And Israel saw the great hand which the Lord had upon the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and Moses, his servant. Then Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to the Lord, and they spoke, saying, I will sing a song to the Lord. Very exalted is he, a horse and his rider cast into the sea. The eternal strength and his vengeance were my salvation. This is my God, and I will make him a habitation, the God of my father, and I will ascribe to him exaltation. The Lord is a master of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he cast into the sea, and the elite of his officers sank in the Red Sea. B'Yam Suf. You understand? Rejoice when the enemies of Israel and God are no more. That thing, that is not relevant to the nations, right? We have a party. We sing and we praise God when our enemies, who are his enemies, are taken out, because he is the one who takes them out. And we do this with no shame. Just like we are commanded. What is Erev Pesach? What is a Korban Pesach? We are commanded to eat the Passover lamb in the streets of Egypt because they worshipped the Lamb God, just like the Edomites do today. The Lamb God. Without apologies, without shame, and with absolute faith in God's command. We are called to slaughter their God and eat their God in their faces. That's what that was, to break away from idolatry. So too, when the time comes and all the false world governments fall, especially the Erev Rav government here in Israel, then you better believe, when Israel becomes what it should be, there will be no idolatry in the world, especially within these holy borders. And that is why Mordechai properly and very appropriately replied to Haman with, your enemies will lie to you, but you will tread. You, meaning Israel, will tread on their high places, on everything, kol bamatecha, on all your holy places, because they have nothing to do with God. And once all this happens, when those who sought to destroy us will become our footstools, when we will fulfill God's command and tread on their high places, when we are all adorned with majesty by our enemies, it shall be proclaimed throughout the world, so shall be done to the man whom the king wishes to honor. And then we, like Mordechai, will be brought before the king. We're going to end here for today. To be continued. We're almost done with the chapter. So as always, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week and have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye.